gentlemen, welcome to our hub session. Can you hear me? Okay, so if you can't hear me, I was told there is the possibility to take some headsets over there. I will just wait that everyone who wants a headset can take it. It's for all the other ones, it's fine. Okay. Welcome to our hub session, Is Europe in the Lead? The discussion is now centering around a couple of questions. What exactly is it that takes Europe in the lead? And I would like to start with a poll among you. Who of you is saying that Europe, energy-wise, is in the lead? So those who believe Europe is in the lead, please raise your hand. Who says that Europe is in the lead on the energy transition? Okay, so it's kind of merely 10 people, yeah? Who says Europe is not in the lead on the energy transition? Okay, and the other ones are abstaining? Who abstains? Some people haven't voted, yeah? Okay, so I would like to do this poll again at the end of our session. I would say there's a majority of you believing that Europe is in the lead, but it's not a very convinced majority, so we will try to figure out if Europe is leading. I'm very happy to have a very nice panel here, and you will hear the presentations by our dear speakers, starting with Philippe Vier, who is going to present market trends on the Capgemini yearly report. And Philippe is the Vice President and Energy Utilities and Chemical Sector Deputy Leader from Capgemini. Then we also have a regulator in our panel. It's Mr. Ernst Dietmar Preinstorfer, who is the head of the International Relations Department from the Austrian regulator E-Control. Interesting for us because, as you know, we're also in the Austrian presidency, not run by E-Control, but still interesting to have an Austrian view on the energy revolution. We have Vera Brenzel. Vera Brenzel is, I would say, the policy boss. Yeah, she's the head of the EU representative office of E.ON, but she's also, in many senses, the policy boss of this important utility, E.ON. And then we have Anders. Anders Baunhøj Hansen is a chief engineer from Energinet, which is the transmission system operator from Denmark. We will have a coffee break as well, and after that we have two more energy ladies. You know, by the way, that only 4% of energy is ladies, so I think we are quite balanced here. It's quite impressive, yeah? We have Alicia Carrasco, who previously worked with Siemens, with Tesla, and today is the CEO of Olevo Energy from Spain. And then finally we will have Marion Labattu. And Marion Labattu, previously working with EDF, is today the Director of Policy in the European Association Euroelectric, based in Brussels. Yeah? And I'm myself the Strategy and Comm Manager from ENTSUI, which is the European Network of Transmission System Operators. Yeah? So now we are not going to engage in a discussion, I don't believe. We try to fact-base our statements, and we try to share with you some insights. Why, on what we believe that Europe is or is not in the lead. So let me start, please, with some views here. And here I took two options. Yeah, the not in the lead is the kind of Europe, the donkey that one tries to get into the better world. Yeah, and the other one is the kind of leading Europe. So what is it? Yeah, and in thinking about it, I identified 4 areas where I believed Europe, if it had to be in the lead, it would need to be performing best on, firstly, mitigating climate change, on the deployment of renewables, that indeed is a game changer, on innovation, and finally on competitiveness. And let's see what kind of statistics we can find. So on number 1, when you look here on mitigating climate change, and when you look at the European trajectory when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions, yeah, then you will see the following picture, yeah. So by the way, these abbreviations that all engineers are liking, the WEM means with existing measures, and WAM means with additional measures, yeah. And then it's also, and we don't have it here, the WOM, saying the without measures, yeah. That is the kind of difference here. So where are we on the ambition that we have? When you look there on the end that we need to achieve, yeah, in order to make it for the COP21 1.5 degree increase, yeah, 95% of emission reduction, yeah. And when you see today's trajectory, unfortunately, you would have some doubts that we are on the right track, yeah. So this green dotted line that you see here, yeah, that is the WEM with the existing measures line, yeah. And then the yellow one is additional measures line, yeah. For example, clean energy package, whatever you have, or the ETS reform, yeah, set aside, etc., yeah. But if you would extend your lines, you wouldn't come to the needed solution of 95%, unfortunately. Now, this is, I think, looking already much better. Yeah, when it comes to the needed decoupling of GDP increase, of greenhouse gas emissions, and then the carbon intensity of our economies. Yeah, and here you see clearly that while we have, especially these days, 2.2 GDP increase in the Eurozone at least, yeah, then you see on the other hand that you have reduction of the greenhouse gas emissions as well as the carbon intensity. Good news, we could say, yeah. On the second point, deployment of renewables, where are we on this? By the way, this is the shares related to the electricity. Yeah? This is the electricity shares in renewables with the 20% target by 2020. And that translates into 35% or 34% of renewables in electricity. Yeah? You could easily say, yes, we are going in the right direction. Yeah? So that's good news, while among the member states of the EU, it's not exactly true for every member state. Some are overshooting and some are a little below the needed target. But we are on the safe side in many senses. And then let's look at this. Yeah. So the point 3, innovation. By the way, innovation, why is it so important? When you read a book like Klaus Schwab, Fourth Industrial Revolution, when you look at, say, the Gartner hype cycle, technology, all know that the current change is all about technology change. This means that we need to invest into technologies, and even more so into testing technologies, into having the pilots on the ground, and in taking innovation into the market. Innovation can mean you can fail, but you need to invest heavily into innovation. And when you look at this picture here, yeah, and then you see EU 28, yeah, unfortunately, we are rather not fantastic, yeah. Japan is spending much more, the US is spending much more, and Europe is definitely not spending enough. And here this is about the public and the private spending combined. You're maybe also aware of the mission innovation that decided in the sidelines of the COP21 in Paris, 2015, that there should be a duplication of RD spending among the signatories in 2021. We are not yet there, even if the Horizon Europe project reads quite impressive. On the last point, where are we on competitiveness? Yeah, and here I simply took the European wholesale price, yeah, as a first kind of indicator. Yeah, and when you look at this graph, then yeah, you see that Japan, in particular post Fukushima, of course, yeah, is one of the most expensive countries. We see also the spike Australia, which was related to the blackout they had and these kind of problems, yeah. But then going down 2016, yeah. And then you see EU, the red line here, yeah. EU as the red line, US, of course, shale gas, etc. Questionable from a sustainability point of view, most probably, yeah, is better, but EU is not that bad. And here looking again on the picture more into the EU picture, yeah, looking at wholesale and on the retail prices, you would see in these pictures that it is a contrasted picture. Interesting to see that the wholesale baseload price on electricity is the highest in countries like the UK, but also in Italy, in Spain, and in Portugal. Yeah, while the retail price is in particular high, interestingly, higher in Denmark than in Germany. I'm German myself, so I was honestly happy to know that. Sorry for you, Anders, yeah, that we are not only the ones to be blamed all the time, yeah, with all the add-ins on the retail price, but all in all, interestingly as well, we have seen that the wholesale price in Europe has increased recently by 22% to be situated around more than 40 euros megawatt hour, which is quite a lot, yeah. Here you see Denmark is in the lead, yeah, on the retail price, more in detail, yeah, followed by Germany and then Belgium. Quite contrasted picture. And here, of course, all the add-ins to the price, feed-in tariffs, transmission distribution, taxes and levies are, of course, responsible. So to conclude on my introductory presentation on these four elements that I believed are decisive, yeah, on mitigating climate change, I would put a question mark. At least the current trajectory is not providing proof that we are in the lead. We could be in the lead, but we would need substantial efforts to be made. On the second point, deployment of RES, I would definitely say, yes, we are in the lead. We are making it for the targets a good situation. On innovation, I would put a question mark. And on the competitiveness, I would put a question mark too, considering that prices are very high. And also the market integration in Europe with all the disparity in wholesale and retail is quite high as well. So thanks for your attention for this first introductory point. And if you have, we will run it the following way. Each time after presentation, feel free to interact and put your first comments. Once we are done with all the presentations, we're going to have a kind of a roundtable discussion on the matters. Yeah? Any questions or comments? Okay, that's not the case. Then I would like Philippe to take the floor. Thanks. C'est pas facile à parler avec ça parce que c'est très bas et derrière.
Okay. Thank you, Suzanne. I am very pleased to present you today a summary of this report, which has been published today, this morning, the World Energy Market Observatory. Of course, this is a challenge for me, 20 minutes for 260 pages. I will go only on 5 key findings. You will be able to download the report. I will give you all the indication for that. First of all, you know Capgemini. We are an end-to-end digital and industry transformation, partnering with our clients for full transformation from consulting to business process outsourcing and managed services. The key findings I will highlight today are the following. The first one is the price of commodities, and this is the basic of our industry. Second point, I will go very quickly because Suzanne developed it. The climate change objectives are threatened. You will see why in Europe. I will focus on the new business model which are progressing, which is a good news thanks to digitization and other new business model. And I will show you which business model are concerned. The fact that the utility landscape is changing, and the good news of this survey is that the financial health of utilities has improved in 2017 and first half of 2018. And a last point on a threat for Europe, the fact that China is becoming a dominant player for energy transition. Let's keep to price commodities. You see the price of the barrel coming from $50 1 year ago to $70 to $80 these days because of economic growth, because of consumption rebound, demand rebound, because of geopolitical tensions, because of limitations from OPEC to Russia. They tried to kill the shale oil producers in the US. They failed. So they make the price grow again. And of course, because of also new ways of working. Second slide, the price of gas. The price of gas, in red, you have the US prices. And in blue, the UK, in green, the Europe Brent, and you see there is a link, of course, between oil and gas prices. You see a rebound in gas prices, which means that the energy will be more expensive to produce when you use gas for that. We are fully dependent on pipelines provisioning because LNG capacities are limited for exporters. We have everything necessary to make gas again from these assets, but there is a limitation in exportation, notably in US, where you have only two liquefaction entities in Cove Point and in Sabine Pass. The wholesale prices rebounded also in 2018. You see the wholesale markets for Europe. This is a very good news for utilities, in fact. When the wholesale prices rebounds, it means that you sell at a better price the energy you produce. This is not a good news for the consumer because the price will grow also. These prices, you see peaks in winter, not only because winter were good winters, but also because the availability of nuclear plants, notably in France, which were at their lowest because of security checks. Climate change objectives, I will go fast because Suzanne introduced the topic. The first news is that the emissions of greenhouse gases in Europe rebounded in 2017, plus 1.4%. We were in advance for the objective of 2020. Will we meet the objective? This is a challenge because in 2018 the emissions will grow again. And this is very interesting to remark that the emissions felt in North America and in US particularly, even if with the policy of Mr. Trump administration. For the energy consumption, we are not on track to meet the second 320 objectives of energy consumption. We will miss the energy efficiency target. This is probably the most difficult target to meet in 2020. We are on track for renewables, thanks to Denmark, thanks to some countries, but all the countries won't meet their objectives. France, UK will probably miss their objectives of 20%. So in this graph, you see in orange the level of renewables, the productions in renewables in 2005. You see the level in green in 2016, and you see the red points, the objectives on each country. You will find all the graphs in this document and all the explanations of Capgemini teams. Renewables. The investment in renewables, which is for wind on the left and solar on the right, the investment decreased a lot. We were at $120 billion per year in Europe in 2010. We are at 40 billions, one third. But at the same time, as the prices of this equipment decrease a lot, we are able to commission more capacities on wind and on solar. Europe is more oriented towards wind. North America is more oriented towards solar. The batteries capacity increase every year, and you see the split between residential batteries, commercial and industrial in red, and grid, meaning utility scale batteries. And we see probably 60% of increase year on year in Europe, which is a good news, and because of the cost of the battery also is in a decreasing trend. The most interesting slide probably of this presentation is this one, the levelized cost of electricity. We see that within the base capacity, the existing nuclear is the cheapest one with about 50 euros per megawatt hour. The new nuclear on the top right in blue is at 100. This is the price from Hinkley Point new build and the engagement of the UK government. You see that, of course, hydro run-off river is the cheapest renewable and intermittent semi-base capacity, but wind and solar are all today comparable to existing nuclear and will be cheapest tomorrow from existing nuclear. This is a new trend. Of course, natural gas peak, coal peak plants are not competitive with these new ways of producing energy. Oops. We study also the amount of commission and decommission capacity every year. You have coal, gas, fuel oil, and we see the continuation of decommissioning of coal plants thanks to energy transition. We see for the first year a net amount of commissioning of gas plants because gas is replacing coal in some countries like Germany, in UK too. And you see, of course, the renewables. The net capacity increase of 15 gigawatts. New capacity being 28 gigawatts. And the decommissioning of fossil fuel is again 10 gigawatts this year. The energy mix in terms of production, not in terms of capacity, which is more meaningful. The energy mix, you see the first circle is where we are today, 2016. The second, 2017, sorry. Second circle where we will be tomorrow morning, 2020. And the third circle where we will be in 2025. We see that the nuclear will decrease from 26% to 21%. We see that the coal will decrease from 20 to 14%. We see a relative stability of gas. We see an increase of wind in green, but we see that even if the capacity of solar increase, the energy produced by solar plants, which are intermittent and which are running on only during days, will be only at 5% in 2025. So we are fully dependent on Russia. Our dependence on gas, Russian gas, is about 35% plus 8% compared to previous year. And this is a threat for European. countries in terms of security of supply. I go fast. Huh? New business model now. This is another angle of this report. New business model. We have made a study with IDC, the analysts. We have interviewed 160 executives at utilities. They answered that their portfolio is evolving everywhere. New business models are coming and a simplification is happening. We see that as the service becomes mainstream, we see that they bet on 5 to 10% of revenues, additional revenues, thanks to new business model, not thanks to existing energy services. You can download also this survey at the following address. When we asked them what would be the new business models which will be significant on your revenues in 3 to 4 years, we have the answer. The first impactful new business model will be EV service infrastructure, recharging, discharging infrastructure. The second one will be microgrid as a service. Then generation and storage at home. Then energy as a service, which is the most profitable and important today. As well as comforted service because they are more mature. We'll see also the answer on terms of the impacts on revenues. We have also interviewed the executives on the threats they see in the competition, and 71% of them answer that Google and Apple, because they are already at home, because they are growing through the smart home, because they are also big users for their data center and producers, and they have extra energy, they will be in the market. Secondly, energy equipment manufacturers that are moving from providing a product to providing a service, then telecommunication company again. When we envisage where the utilities are investing today, in smart homes, in smart buildings and smart factories, in smart mobility, in smart cities, we see that the utilities are not alone in this landscape. You have utilities, you have their sisters energy services companies, you have the equipment manufacturers, you have the vehicles manufacturers, you have the GAFAM, you have the classical CPG retailers, the telcos, the builders, and so on and so forth. And the intensity of the blue is the intensity of the positioning of each actor. Our messaging here is that utilities should partner with ecosystems to build the most profitable business models of tomorrow. Utilities landscape is changing. Good news in 2017. For the first year since 5 to 6 years, we reported an improvement in revenue levels. We have a sample of 16 utilities, and 11 of them reported increase in their revenues. The margins are continuing to decrease, but slightly decrease, and the biggest utilities have a flat margin, which is a good news. It has not happened since years. The debt level is high and is continue to progressing because they are investing. And the requirement for CapEx is very, very important. The stock performance was very good, meaning that the markets applauded the transformation and the digitization of the utilities. And notably the German companies which have started to invest again and which are in a better financial situation than they were in the past, which is a good news. Even if they have a new position on the market, they have concentrated on each part of the value chain. And you will also find in this report the fact that the CO2 intensity per kilowatt hour generated decreased by 6 to 10% every year from all the utilities. Of course, they divest their fossil fuel generations. And I have a last slide, two last slides on China. China has invested in grids in the southern of Europe and in UK, and you see all the acquisition. They take a small share of the capitals of the utilities, so they are already there, even in Luxembourg. China is also exporting aggressively windmills, solar panels, coal plants, and tomorrow, as they have commissioned the first third generation of nuclear plants, they will export also nuclear reactors. They will export batteries. They will export. China is the first market for electric mobility. So China is invading the world and Europe. China has also a project to put a direct transmission line from the west of China to Europe, and this is serious. New Silk Road to produce in China and sell the energy in Europe. This is really serious. And China is also the energy transition leader because they produce 95% of the rare earths and the rare metals. They have only 30% of the reserves, but they produce 95%. So take care of the China coming in the markets. Our key recommendation, my last slide, promise, to improve our climate change fight, we have to set a carbon floor price higher than today. Today it's at 20 euros per ton. It should be at 50 or 80 to give an economic signal. We should transform the mix, of course. We should take care of the fact that the DSO, and this morning in the keynote sessions we had the new roles of the DSO. They become local electricity system operator, and they are not only the market enablers. Their role is changing a lot. The deployment of electric transportation will progress to reach decarbonized energy objectives, and you see in the catalog of the car manufacturers that all will have only electric vehicles in 20 years. Take care of the gas dependence on Russia. It could threaten the security of supply of Europe. The utilities have made big transformation programs, but they can accelerate. They have to accelerate to renew their financial health. And for that, there is a lever which is obvious, which is digitization, customer experience, digital operations, and new business models leveraging digital. And then I will not come back on China position on energy transition. So Europe is a good student, but not a leader of energy transition. Definitely. You can download the report at the following address, capgemini.com/WEMO, WEMO, or you can scan the code. I have flyers for you. My colleague Vito, who is there, has also flyers if you want to download the report and to study it. Thank you.
Many thanks, Philippe. Maybe stay here. Also, unfortunately, Philippe has to leave us already at 4 today. If you have questions to him, please take the opportunity or comments to what was just said. Don't hesitate. Anyone who wants to comment? I will start with one question to you, Philippe. Yeah? You were saying that China, in a way, needs to be monitored by Europe. Yeah? And it's interesting to listen, for example, to Fatih Birol from the IEA, who would say that China is going to supply the world with cheap, clean technology, and he was rather seeing that as positive. Yeah, in your statement, it seemed a bit like a problematic. Yeah, so when it comes to climate change mitigation, does it matter that it's China or Europe, or what is your point of view?
My point of view is that if we depend on China on everything, supplying our power, our gas, and our commodities, if they take predominant shares in our utilities, we will lose our independency, and we will lose somewhere our security of supplies. This is a good news, but a danger.
Yeah. So I think it's important what you highlight here is it's all about also industrial policy, yeah? Europe being a leader on clean technology and not leaving it to the outside world, I suppose. Yeah. Any questions out here? No? Well, okay, so then many thanks, Philippe, for this interesting statement. And our next speaker now is Vera Brenzel. So what's going on? For some reason, attends. Wie sieht das Scheiß Ding jetzt aus? Ist der vielleicht ausgemacht? I need some support. So, I need maybe this. Vielleicht kein Saft mehr drauf. Is there anyone helping or something? I don't know what we need to. Maybe we need to move it. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, we have a technical problem. We are trying because it's visible there, but not here. Maybe it's just the screen. Yeah. Was? Ja, du siehst es, aber es muss ja aufgemacht werden, ja? Yeah, for some reason there's no... Oh, okay.
It's turned it off.
It was turned off. Okay, maybe we touched it somehow here. But you can maybe already introduce yourself.
Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and we will have that little electric break. To introduce myself, I'm Vera Brenzel. I'm the head of the Political Affairs Department of E.ON. E.ON is in the course of taking over Energy. Energy is another large German energy company, and you might have noticed, it works, super. Okay, how do I, is this the... So, okay. And my address to you today is, are we ready for the next challenge, a climate challenge? And I think you, I don't really want to bore you with all our transactions that we are envisaging the next year, and I think we have another 12 intensive months to restructure a little bit the company. You may know E.ON and RWE are the large, pretty much the two large companies in electric companies or energy companies in Germany. And together with RWE, we have decided to continue what we already started with his spin-off of Uniper. Do you hear me better now? Okay. So with the deal, with the transaction agreed on with RWE, we are continuing what we started with the spin-off of Uniper in 2016. That was the time when capital markets, our own company, we realized that we have two different system and business models within the company. One was the very strong, centralized, and extremely top-down organized business, like large power stations, large investments of €1 billion quality very often. And on the other hand, we already noticed in 2014, 2015, that there was a growing decentralization. So there was a growing sort of move to go into the regions, much less centralized power stations, much more renewables, decentralized and distributed generation. And so that was very much bottom up, also from an organizational point of view, management style. So we decided then that it would be better to spin off what is the classical energy world, which has, dispatchable energy, trading floors, and deals on the trading markets, and those who are more in the regulated area, which are grids, distributed generation, and obviously customers. And with the future E.ON, we will have a number of roughly 50 million customers. We will have 1.5 million kilometers of distribution grids. And I think together this brings a synergy where the customer, who becomes a prosumer more and more, will have the opportunity also to shape what is the decentralized energy world. And I'll come to that a little bit with more details. I don't really want to say too much on the RWE thing, but I think for RWE it's a growth story. They will surrender, give up or slowly phase out the lignite and have a growth path in renewables area. So unfortunately, we will get rid of we will pass on our renewable assets to RWE, but then in return we will have 77% of energy. And Philippe, you had mentioned China. Yes, we will have RWE as a key stakeholder with 16.67% as a key stakeholder in the Aeon market cap. Climate action. It was mentioned a couple of times, and you can say it's a success story, it's no success story. Obviously, climate the Paris agenda will never going to be reached with electricity only. And what I'm showing you right now is obviously a rather electric story. We need to decarbonize the heating sector, the cooling sector. We'll have to decarbonize the agriculture sector, mobility, and this is going to cost us a bit more than just an EU ETS. So I think, yes, we have started very well. I think the EU ETS has been a success story after lots of very big headaches we had in from 2011 to 2017 roughly. But I think with the backloading and with the market stability reserve, we're roughly, and I think on a very fundamentally led 15 to 17 euro per ton of CO2, which is not bad. What does it mean for us as Europeans? And we're still talking, is Europe in the lead of climate transition? I would say if you look at the top 20 market caps worldwide, you won't see one single European company. If you look at the top 20 clean tech market caps, you will find 50% roughly with European origin. And obviously these are, 4 of them are just wind turbine manufacturers. And I don't even think that these are the big growth companies of the future. These are the leaders to other leaders that will come in with increasing digitization, with increasing sector coupling. And I think in this context, I'll come back to that a little later, Europe can take the lead in areas where other continents are not even thinking about. So the EU climate change challenge is shifting. So the non-ETS focus is very strong. And I'll give you an example. We have in Germany, we're short in the non-ETS sector. We're not achieving the 2020 goals. And what is happening? In 2019, the Germans will present or will table a climate act called Klimaschutzgesetz. And with this, we will have a burden sharing between the different sectors. But the different sectors are not performing. So how is Germany going to cope with that? If they do not reach their targets in 2020, they will have to buy certificates. Where? On the European market. To what price? We don't know yet. I mean, it could be 25 euro per certificate. We don't know yet. But I mean, you have to already make provisions to buy those certificates in 2020 because the European Union has a non-ETS, the effort sharing directive, which obviously is binding. So what does it mean? The German finance minister will have to then address the environmental ministry, the transport ministry, and the agriculture ministry and say like, hey guys, so who's going to pay the bill? And this is why Germany is already developing internally a CO2 transfer price, because they will have to kind of see how the burden is going to be shared, which is good because I mean this is going to be the kickoff what Philippe has addressed of a carbon floor price, and I think the carbon floor price will be important in order to make new business models competitive. So together with the decarbonization, we see an increasing role of the grid, and you might have noticed if you see the new business model of Aeon, this is going to be lots of grids and for 14 member states, European member states. And why do we think that the big changes will come in the DSO grids? Is because 90% or even 94% in Germany of the renewable energy are connected on distribution grids, and we have congested grids. We have backflows, and these backflows are not entirely, the TSO grids cannot absorb to 100% of those backflows. So what does it mean? We won't replace TSO grid extension. But what we will be able to do as DSOs is introduce flexibility, try to level out the peak flows, and try to find solutions to absorb either through storage or through new uses or through demand response the electricity use, and also use other infrastructures. Power to gas is one of the topics that is currently being discussed in at roundtable still in Berlin. But the interesting thing is that you see that more and more from industry, from TSO, from DSO size, from the gas industry, from the electricity industry, they're all going to a power to gas situation. Is that unique? No, it is not unique. But I think it is good to start with some sort of exhaust pipes for the overcrowding electricity. So what does that mean if I come back? Is Europe in the lead of energy transition? I would say in terms of technology, no. In terms of technology, the Chinese are clearly in the lead. They have huge PV solar panel manufacturers, and I think the better part of the solar panels being sold in Europe are of Chinese origin. Do we have the data capabilities like the Americans? No, I don't think we have that yet. The GAFAM are those companies who I think are in the lead in really in turning big data into a business model. But what can Europe do? And I think this is a big chance that we should not underevaluate. We have a very good regulatory lead, and this is one of the issues that none of you have addressed. I mean, neither you, Susanne, nor Philippe, that good governance and good regulation is not entirely all what Europe has delivered so far, but it has delivered on a regulatory framework that is comprehensive. And I think Europe is the first one to try to translate Paris into a holistic framework. So where do I see Europe? And I would like to quote one of our union leaders, Vassiliadis, who says, Europe has the system competence. And I think the system competence is a combination of the American, sorry, you can't see that, the American data competency combined with the Chinese technology competency, mixing it up and introducing and integrating different sectors. That's where Europe can be in the lead. Is it in the lead? I don't know, because we still have some things ahead. What do we need to get to go into, to really be in the lead? I do think we need carbon pricing for all energy consuming sectors. And this is something that obviously has increasingly also been addressed by academia, regulators, and I think politicians are slowly acknowledging that there is a need for a clear carbon signal. Obviously, we need EU funding, and I'm not talking about more EU funding just because of the sake of having more money, but I think the innovation pace and the scalability that we need requires funds that are clearly targeted towards low carbon. And I think what Commissioner Oettinger has proposed is quite good, because structural funds will have some earmarking on low carbon, and I think this is a good start for more targeted funding. And obviously the state aid guideline. I think this is the most important policy concept that the European Commission will have in the next couple of years. You know that the current state aid guidelines for environment and energy are going to be revisited, and a reform is planned for next year. It might take a little while because we're in the middle of a change of commission. But together with state aid, I see 4 possibilities for the energy future, which will make energy transition more efficient. First of all, more auctioning, more tendering of efficiency, of solutions. Let the market deliver the right answers to the questions that we have in the energy transition. Second of all, I think we need much more input funding rather than output funding. If you look at the feed-in tariff system, it is totally it's no longer, I think, fit for purpose. We need more upfront innovation investment, and I think that could be tendered as well. I mean, with probably a benchmark, who can reduce carbon for the least cost for energy emitting sectors. And so I think an ambitious policy must reflect that, this new energy chapter. And I think as Aon we hope to be well placed and well positioned to embrace this new future. And I'm happy to take your questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Vera, for this very interesting contribution. Also kind of taking the example of one company, maybe those who listened this morning to the big introductory session where Bloomberg New Energy Finance presented those 10 that have been leading in the beginning of the millennium, yeah? And those that are remaining. Aon was one of the 10 that is still in the picture, but Vera described that the business model has been revamped quite a bit, yeah? So I would have one first question for Vera, yeah? In not having renewables anymore, you were talking about this swap with RWE taking energy and 77% and not having renewables anymore. Isn't that contradictory with the ambition of Aon to be one of the leaders in climate change?
No, but it's because I think it is not about technology. It's not about generation. I think we've got a threefold generation, renewable generation altogether in Europe, and compared to the consumption. But what we need is solutions. We need to combine demand and supply. We need to combine electricity, gas, heating, cooling, and transport. We need to combine the possibilities of a prosumer in a local energy system. We need to combine different local energy systems with others. We need to combine little renewables in a virtual power plant. And all this is only possible with big data, and this is only possible if we use digitization and especially use artificial intelligence to its utmost. And this is where I have one pledge to also to the European Commission: do not come forward with the e-privacy regulation, because this is going to destroy the possibilities that we see in digitization, which is a clear balance between customer protection and business opportunities. So I think, no, we don't need to produce energy, but if we manage and if we provide solutions, I think that is a big contribution.
Thanks, Vera, for this. Do we have any questions or comments in the audience? Yes? Anyone? I'm tracking a little the points that our speakers are raising on what are maybe the litmus tests for a successful Europe leading, yeah? And in a way, Philip and myself, we started off with a list that included very much climate and innovation, competitiveness, including the case with China, yeah? Renewables. But Philip already added the energy efficiency. And Vera added now the good governance or regulatory framework. I think that's a very important point. But also system solutions, digitalization and networks as important parts of Europe in the lead. Yeah? So I'm very curious now, what is the view of the regulators, and here in particular of e-control. What is it that makes Europe being in the lead? So I'm very happy to have Mr. Preinstorfer now to present regulation in Europe in the lead. Maybe you can also elaborate a little more on this good governance and regulatory framework that Vera already mentioned.
Thank you, Susanne. Happy to be here today and to present you my views on the topic, is Europe in the lead? And my topic is regulation, of course. Let's start with that. What is good and bad regulation? So good regulation, of course, corrects market failures, acknowledges risk and uncertainty, is always evaluated periodically, can be challenged, and then, of course, is independent, neutral, transparent. And the opposite then is bad regulation, in a way. In particular, why I think that Europe is in a good position here is because we have a European directive that established sector utility regulators and keeps them, this regulation protects the regulators and keeps them independent from the regulators industry and also from the governments, yeah? So from the politics. And that's why I think this is a very good precondition for Europe to have a good regulatory system in place. I'm not sure whether it's always perfect, but in general, I think it's good. And it's much better than in maybe other areas in the world where there's a sector regulator, but it's part of the ministry, and it's basically involved in the day-to-day political discussion, yeah, when you talk about prices, when you do utility regulation. So here, definitely, I think Europe is in the lead from the framework, from the setup of the independent regulation, and this is very positive. This is a very general slide, but I need to mention it that will show a little bit, start showing the complexity of the system. We have these ambition targets want to have a competitive, sustainable and secure market, and this triangle as such creates tensions with each other. We know that the more renewables we get, that it has an effect on security, supply security. So it creates tensions, but we all have targets in this area, and we have positive targets, we have ambitious targets. We not only speak about Europe is in the lead on renewables with taking the Paris targets serious. No, we also have an ambitious target in the European Union to create the biggest energy market in the world, and we have that. European Union with its neighbors is the biggest energy market in electricity and natural gas. So here definitely Europe also is in the lead. And also as regards supply security, you mentioned this not in your presentation, you didn't have this in your points, but I also think as regards supply security, Europe, Central Europe is in a very good situation here, yeah? So power outages, also the gas system, we have a very good one, yeah? So I think we have very good ambitious targets in all these three areas. Currently we focus very much on sustainability, but we should not forget on the other topics. I tried to make a SWOT analysis on my topic, on the regulatory framework. So what are strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats? So I've spoken a little bit about the strengths. So one of the strengths for the regulatory framework for our target is, of course, that the European Union is a supranational body. That makes life much easier than for other countries to cooperate. Yeah, it's much better to agree within the Union, even if it's very painful, and those who are involved to know this, but it's easier than for other countries who do not have the European Union as a supranational body on the top. So it's already more difficult for the energy community, who actually aims at the same targets, but it's just a contract. And it's more complex where we do not have this international agreement. So this is definitely a strength. We have therefore a good legal framework and also already the institutions established. So we have the body of the transmission system operators and SWOTs. We have the body of the European regulators established. There will be new bodies established. So the institutional framework works, and this is definitely a strength. A weakness is everybody who is working in that process is knowing that it's a heavy, lengthy process, and that's not always good. So when you know how long it takes until the first idea from changing a system or tackling a problem until it's there, it's a long way to go. First we have to do, in the regulatory framework in Europe, EU regulation, then we transform it into a framework guideline, then into a network code. This has to be analyzed a couple of times, and after some years we get a piece of legislation which will enter in force maybe then only 1-2 years later. So this is a weakness. The market design also weakness is still dominated from national interests, and also as a consequence, if we aim at the creation of, to create the internal energy market, is that we still need regional markets as an interim step, and by that creating regional bodies. And who knows a little bit about institution understands that once an institution or a body is there, it's very difficult or impossible to get rid of it. Yeah? So that's maybe a weakness as well. The opportunities, that's very clear. The creation of a low carbon energy market and economy for the benefit of the consumers. That's basically the primary target of the so-called winter package of the European Commission, which is currently in the trilogue, so in the final process. We want to create a low carbon economy for the benefit of consumers, and for doing that we need the right market design, and this is very, very complex. And in addition to that, the energy market could boost the technological development, and today in the morning in one of the keynote sessions I've heard that we will by that also educate maybe a lot of people who then could work on capacity building in other countries, other regions. So that's definitely an opportunity. The threat is that we have a massive development of rules, and it's very, very difficult to keep the overview. I think there's not a single person in Europe who has the total overview, understands each and everything in the electricity market. That's definitely a threat. Imagine that the grid code in a country is maybe 2,000 pages, the overall grid code, with the technical, the legal, all the specifications, yeah? And you have such a package of grid code. Usually the grid code is in normal pages, like this. Multiply it by 28. Then you have, this is the European grid code currently, and this has to be harmonized. Of course, this is a long way to go. That's why it's also a lengthy process, imagine. But in the changes, it's difficult to keep the overview, and we are currently doing it in a very rushy way. So we make rules currently on rules that maybe are not properly tested. So do we do it the right or the wrong? This is a question. We will find out in future whether we did the right or the wrong, but this is definitely a threat. The challenges for the internal energy market through increased complexity embedded in a world driven by mega trends. So when I created that slide, I wanted that it looks complicated, because it is complicated. And again, I have the three areas: supply security, competition, and sustainability. Because I have the most words here in supply security, it doesn't mean it's the most complex one. It's just by accident. But for supply security, I've divided it here in a way that on the left side, it's the problems created by demand. Yeah, on the right side, more supply disruptions. So there are a lot of threats who makes life more complicated as regards security of supply. And we have to do something in future. We have to do a lot to keep our level of supply security on a high level. Also, we have heard that when we do the transformation from national dominated, non-liberalized market to the internal energy market, whatever that is at the end, because nobody knows and we do not know where really our journey ends, then also the competitive sector becomes more complex. We have now much more markets, yeah. We have even a disintegration sometimes through the integration of renewables. We split the Austrian-German market. We have loads of new market players, actors, organizations, authorities, and the whole thing becomes more complex. And also in the area of renewables, we know it's increasingly becoming complex. All this, I just want to highlight maybe this chart. It comes from the Austrian transmission system operator, APG, and provides a view into the year 2030 with the Austrian political target to achieve 100% electricity from renewable energy sources by 2030. 100% on a balanced way, so there's still possible to have some fossil fuels for backup, but we should consume in Austria 100% electricity over the year, in an average, from renewable energy sources. So what does this mean? So we can only do this, mainly do this, with PV and wind, and this creates then these massive peaks. Yeah? And you have here the black line. This is the current consumption in Austria. Yeah? In winter more, in summer less. And this creates two problems. What do we do with the capacity? Yes, we have the positive situation in Austria that we have, on top of that normal consumption, 3.5 gigawatt on pumped hydro. So we can pump a little bit, but after 1 week it's over. So the storage is full. We can have something else. And what do we do with the electricity? So we need seasonal storage to use the kilowatt hours which we produce in a windy season than in winter where we need more. So this is quite challenging, and nobody has yet the full answer. Can only say that definitely the jobs of all these people here around is safe for the next 20 years because we have to solve a lot of problems. So, so this, I think we are in the lead in Europe in all the three areas, but we need to keep the issue serious and look at it because the world is becoming more and more complex and we have to tackle all these problems. So an answer is maybe dynamic regulation, what we as regulators have to do for the regulation, and the issue is we need to synchronize somehow the pace of the technological development with the generation adequacy development, so we need to align it that consumption, so supply and demand matches. We have to develop the grid, and this, look at Germany, I'm Austrian, I can blame always the Germans, I'm allowed to do this. So it's very, very difficult to build grids, yeah, and to build lines. Yeah? But also market integration development is a big issue, and then the regulatory development. The message to the utilities is that whenever I work for the regulators since 2001, and they always heard, oh, you need a stable regulatory development. You need a stable regulatory development, basically, which means that an investor would like to have a legal framework. Then he makes an investment and it's stable until it's written off, it makes money. So this will not be possible, forget it. Coming back to my old slide, forget it. There is a lot of dynamics in it, and everybody, and in this presentation, all the other presentations around this event will show you that a lot of dynamics in it. By nature, it will change rapidly. So, but as a precondition, and this is now the gray areas are quoted from a public consultation from CER, the Council of European Energy Regulators, who addressed this issue. Dynamic regulation is that a precondition for dynamic regulation is, of course, the full, coherent and timely implementation in praxis of the legislative and regulatory framework in the Union, appropriate oversight to ensure trust in the market, and strong link between the evolution of the energy sector and regulatory implementation by developing future-proof European solutions, and so on. I don't want to read more, but I think things have to change. Also, our regulatory processes, they have to be, we have to get rid of some heavy weight in this process, and we need to change this to be able to adapt it to the development in the market, in the infrastructure, in the rapid technological development. I will conclude with basically two proverbs and one quote of Jean Monnet, one of the founders of the European Union. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. This is not a top-down approach where the legislator or the regulator regulates and dictates. It can only work if we all go together, and the utilities play a very, very important role in future, even maybe more important than the TSOs, and they will play the crucial role in the energy transformation in future. And we need the right organizations and institutions, and this is what Jean Monnet said, one of the founders of the European Union. Nothing is possible without man, but nothing lasts without institutions. So thank you for your attention.
Many thanks, Dietmar, I think, for this interesting contribution. And my shopping list for Europe in the lead has now made it to 10 points. First of all, you have supported Vera in saying that regulation, and you were calling this dynamic regulation. I should also maybe advertise here a very good paper by the Council of the European Energy Regulators, the 3D strategy that you implicitly have used here, yeah, which exactly emphasizes as a third D, dynamic regulation. But you also added, and I should have, of course, thought about it as well, yeah, is security of supply, yeah, which is indeed, compared to many other countries and regions in the world, extremely high in Europe. Yeah. So I would like to ask you a question on this, let's say, dynamic regulation. Yeah. Maybe regulators are not necessarily known for being proactive. They're rather, let's say, reactive. Yeah. You try to find the black sheep in the club, yeah, and to avoid that those that you're controlling are not doing the job correctly. Yeah. But what could it mean exactly? How could you underpin the energy transition with such proactive dynamic regulation?
For a utility regulator is, of course, the cost of the grid the issue. We are basing we make regulation on that on the assumption of old market models and on the old energy world. Yeah, and over the years we developed regulation in a way that we have started with negotiating things over cost plus regulation about to incentive regulation, incentive-based regulation, and basically reflecting the grid reality from top down, yeah, from a transmission grid where the big power plants are connected down to the distribution grids where the consumption takes place. We heard that this will change and that more and more power plants are going to be connected in the distribution grid, so it will become a more important player. And this has to be reflected then into in the regulation of grid tariffs. Then also the benefit, what comes now up in the winter package, which is the local energy communities, or also the renewable energy communities, which should bring the benefits of this transition, make it possible to harvest the benefits for every consumer. And this is currently not reflected in the regulation. We need to find ways to make the grid costs or the regulation affordable also for these areas. And this is one part of the dynamic regulation that we have to completely change our view on grid tariffs. The grid will massively change. It will not be this top-down electricity on big power plants on the transmission grid or coming from abroad, but it will also get a lot of electricity from the distribution grid. And how is this reflected in the costs? And then one question, if maybe with always better insulated houses, some people will start cut-offing themselves in future from the electricity grid. So what do we do then? So there's a lot of questions, challenges ahead of us, and this needs to be tackled, not alone, but jointly with the other stakeholders, with the politics, the consumers, the organizations, together with Europe.
Many thanks for this very interesting answer. Any questions here? Also, by the way, from the panelists, if you want to comment back, take the... Yeah, a comment? No. Okay, so many thanks, Dietmar, yeah? And then before the coffee break, we have one... this now. What's happening now? So hier schwierig. Our next speaker is now Anders, but verstehe ich nicht so ganz. Hier, da was. Super. Okay. So now I'm very happy to introduce a TSO perspective. Yeah, we have heard utility, we have heard regulator, we have heard Capgemini, and now we are listening to Anders from Energinet. Yeah, please.
Thank you. As said, I'm from Energinet in Denmark, and Energinet is TSO for the power and gas system in Denmark. And in Denmark, we have the political agreement in 2050 we should be fossil independent. 2030, the power production should be based on renewables, and we're also now looking into a situation with electric vehicles. From 2030, all sold vehicles should be electrical, and 40% of the fleet should be based on electrical vehicles. So as a TSO, we're looking into a changing environment, and we are obligated to do some system whole-oriented analysis to cope with this transition. I will show some points from this analysis based from our study System Perspective 2035. So in this study, we take the NSOE, international or European scenarios, as an international boundary towards 2040, and put this on the framework for our national study. But we also look very much on the distributed resources, because the DSO is also really changing this years to come with much more solar and batteries and electric vehicles. If we look into the international situation, taking this three NSOE scenarios, we have two where Europe is on target with its ambitious target towards 2050, at least for the 80% reduction. And we're now talking up to 95 and even climate neutral. So you might say there might be a need for a global climate action plus scenario to see what situation we're looking into. But putting these green scenarios and a not on track scenario about as a boundary, we can see what's the situation. If you look at the wind and solar increase towards 2040, it's significantly increasing, going towards for the whole Europe up to 50%. And that's the situation we're looking into in Denmark today. 50%, that's really get challenges. But that's for the whole EU. So it's really a new situation. And if you look into to the North Sea countries, we are going up to 70% of production based on renewables from solar and wind. So it's really a harsh environment. And then we might even have a global climate action plus. So it's really a changing situation we got to cope with. If we look at the power prices in the least ambitious one in 2030, for 1 year sorted in the price duration curve, it's quite stable prices actually. So it's good environment for investing in wind and solar. You get a reasonable price. But then if you go to the ambitious one, you have a lot of production of wind and solar with very low prices. So it's really a harsh environment for investing if you don't get good prices when you want to sell it. So this is the base case we are looking into, and I have to say this is a base case, because then you're looking what are we going to do with this. And one thing is, you could put some batteries, and it does not really solve it actually. It's just so much production for wind and solar in this region, so you need more than batteries. You can build much more transmission, and we definitely as a TSO looking into more transmission. It's a good tool. It does not solve it at all. We need to go into more sector coupling, sector integration to cope with all this abundance of renewable energy in so many hours on a year. So first conclusion is we definitely need transmission and sector coupling with a gas system, with a heating system, and then of course also use batteries where we can use them efficiently. If we take into our analysis, we look where can we do this sector coupling actually, try to analyze how much can we get from this sector coupling. So we split it out in some different types of sector coupling. Of course, the known one is the household prosumer, investing in solar panels and in batteries and heat pumps and charging electric vehicles. That's one of the small ones, but it's very essential actually. Then the industry prosumers, where we have much more process heat pumps, so they get flexible using heat pumps or using gas, depending on what's the price of electricity. So it's really flexible, or it could be, it's not now, but it could be very flexible prosumer from the industry. Then we have a lot of district heating also in Denmark, and decentralized CHP combined with the heat pumps, also a flexible one, producing heat from the heat pump or from the CHP. So very good. But all these ones does not produce any fuels, and we definitely need fuels for aviation, for heavy transport. So it's also part of the solutions to cope with the ambitious target towards 2050. So we're also looking into some, you might say, energy plant where you actually combine the traditional electricity plant with a biorefinery. So to say it quite simple, you got a situation then if you have low prices on electricity, you produce a little excess electricity, but a lot of heat and a lot of biofuel. And then if the prices go up due to lack of wind and solar, with the same plant, actually you regulate down your electrolyzers and you start using the biomass converted to gas used for backup capacity. And because it's warm, it's actually working in this fuel production mode, so it's instantly available just for up and regulation and stabilizing the grid. So we think we need to look more into this type of plants, combining power plants, biorefinery. Not necessarily owned by one entity. It could be an industry cluster. Different market solutions could be. So this is part of the solution we definitely think. So summing up, you might say that, anyway, we need this prosumer. So this is a little more detailed about the individual prosumer, because looking into DSO, what's happening there. So we put this environment or the scenarios on the individual consumer to see what would they invest if they're looking at the money pocket. And what we see, we might have a prosumer where everyone has electric vehicle, solar on the roof up to 12 kilowatts, invested in a battery and have a heat pump. So it's a total different prosumer than we have today. What we find out, they will not invest so much batteries that they could go off-grid, because then you need 150 Tesla walls in your house, and no one will really have this, because that's no way. But the situation is that during the summer, there's a lot of export to the grid. During the winter, there's a lot of import of low-cost wind production from the North Sea area. What we also see is that if you look at the existing capacity on the grid, on a typical feeder, this is the existing capacity. And if you put on a smart grid and say, this is what you have to do with, you actually were able to take the existing feeder and deliver this very high electrified solution. But you definitely need a smart grid with dynamic tariffs regulating this. But in the simulation, it works with this. But we don't have this market solutions at the moment. So this is if you look in the existing capacity. But if you don't have a smart grid, you really go up to more than 300% overload on the grid, and very huge demand for reinforcing the grid. So what we see, smart grid, well done, actually can do a lot for not getting too much cost for investing in the distribution area. And it works quite good together with the big scale solutions, offshore wind and all this, summer and winter. So I'm not going into detail with this, but just as I said, it's a system-oriented analysis. So we're looking into the whole energy system with the power system and the gas system and the fuel and the heat. And where do we have all this connection, this sector coupling to cope with this transition? And it seems really to work, actually. You got enough storage capacity in the gas system, so even if you don't run on interconnectors, you could store the capacity in the gas system, but it's much more cost efficient to use the interconnectors. And we should, if we want to be winning, do the cost efficient solution. But we still got the backup system from the gas, and gas is an essential part of the system. Looking into this transition very roughly from today or almost today, the electricity consumption get up to doubled in total, because much more electricity for heating, for transport with electric vehicles, and for power to gas and power to X. So it's not only producing gas, but it's also further refining this gas to liquid fuels for aviation and all this. So this is doubling the need for electricity as we see to cope with it. And then, of course, you just discuss where do this electricity come from. And if we do a least cost analysis, it's definitely from a much more wind and solar. The blue one is wind and the yellow is solar. So much more wind and solar. And then the plant's capacity are available for backup, but it's not running that much. Actually, it's the flexible consumption, it's the interconnectors, and for some hours, this backup. So we really do not need baseload plants for the future. We need this flexible, being able to go in some hours where we need it. So this is the transition. So summing up to some conclusions, I think it's fair to say that Europe actually has the resources and potential to be in lead in the energy revolution. It's possible to do, actually, but don't be lazy to say we are winning, because as mentioned, there's a lot of areas where we're not winning, so we need to reinforce to go for this fast transition. One thing is about the market and system development. We need this smart grid efficient coupling of TSO and DSO, so we don't end up in a very costly reinforcement of the grid. But we also might need to have in our market smaller bit sizes, so the flexible small consumers can go into market, smaller time resolution and geographical resolution. We are in Europe very focused about zonal pricing, but we might need to split this zonal in smaller areas to getting market and physics close together. So we could get some inspiration from US, not to say to copy, because this is not what we're going to do, but get this inspiration, because they're very focused about nodal pricing and get it very close. So it's really essential. And then we need this resilient operation of living nurture system, because there's no plant running unless it's paid for it for many hours. So it's converter-based production and consumption, and we need to stabilize this. So that's learning how to run a converter-based system. Then on the sector coupling issue, we definitely need some research and innovation on new type of power plant. This combination of power plant and biorefinery, producing fuels from electricity most of the time, but being able to do some backup. And then we need to be better knowledge about hydrogen. We definitely need the gas system, but we need to be able to cope with the low carbon gas with more hydrogen, because otherwise you can't go with this very fast reduction of CO2. So hydrogen in the gas system for some areas could be industrial clusters, could be specific transmission lines. It's relatively cheap to transport in long distance hydrogen in a pipeline. So I think this is that's so far my comments. So looking forward to questions.
Yes. Thanks a lot, Anders, for your contribution. And I kind of noted that you added in particular the point sector coupling to the list, yeah? And we can maybe put it to system solutions, yeah? Because in a way this is part of the overarching system solution picture. Any questions or comments to Anders for his contribution? Very silent. So I'm now abusing from my position as a moderator, unless you totally oppose to scrap the coffee break, because I believe we are in a kind of an interesting dynamic here, and I'm a little worried that you would all run away and other people would come back, and then my second vote on do you believe Europe is in the lead or not would be completely falsified. Yeah? So I prefer to keep you. And therefore, the next speaker now, unless anyone opposes, the next speaker is Alicia Carrasco. And Alicia is director, the founder and the CEO of Olevo Energy.
Okay. So thank you for the invitation, Suzanne, to be here today. So I'm going to speak a bit about how Olevo Energy was born. And I think it's relevant today because Olevo Energy is an energy strategy consultant that tries to achieve how to implement directives that are coming to Europe into national regulations and into national products. So we do see the countries and solutions providers, but they are going to approach different countries. They have an issue because they find that regulations are implemented in different ways in different countries. Okay, so when we are talking about directives, we do see that the European Union is right on track on having a framework, a regulatory framework, to approach climate change steps to lower the potential increase of temperatures in the planet. With that in mind, we do see that we have different directives that are now under negotiation, or some of them are being already finally negotiated and approved. But we do see that there are some things that are not taken into account. For instance, when we do have a target for renewable, we do have a target for energy efficiency, but we don't have a target for flexibility. And when we are talking about flexibility, we know how much renewable generation we're going to expect. We expect 32.5% on energy efficiency improvement, but we don't have a figure, an objective, a target for flexibility. And I think today we are all going to talk about flexibility, but we don't know what the value of flexibility is going to be. So I think the directives are missing the opportunity now, but they can do it later on understanding what is the target, what is the value of flexibility, that have to be together to integrate renewable, to integrate energy efficiency, and to also integrate more active consumers and more active cities. In fact, when Olevo Energy was born, is responding to the fact that in 2010, I set up a coalition called today Smart Energy Demand Coalition, and we wanted to have aggregation and flexibility down in the system. And we do have a market directive today that is under negotiation that is bringing aggregation and flexibility into the market. But when we are going to implement all the national, all the network codes, like electricity balancing guideline, we do see that different countries, different member states are implementing network codes in a different way. So today, 8 years after we set up the Smart Energy Demand Coalition to fight and to lobby for aggregation and for flexibility, we do see the countries, member states, do have different approach for how to welcome aggregators, aggregation and flexibility into the balancing services. So we do see that still there is a long way to go for directives and regulations into harmonize how countries implement the directive of the European Union. So when we are talking to Innovation Challenge and commenting on what you say that it was set up recently ago, the Ministerial Innovation Challenge, I see that the European Union and the European utilities and European companies, they are doing the homework and they are quite advanced on setting up the technology and the innovation for the current processes that we are to improve And when we have to think about the smart meter rollout, the European companies might be leading the pace. But when we are looking about how to integrate distributed energy resources, we are not so far ahead that we can be. In fact, the electric vehicles in Europe we are not the leaders on electric vehicles. So what we see in terms of innovation and money, we do see that we have put a lot of money on a FP7 and an Horizon 2020 and now on the next scheme. But what we lack behind still is how to bring all the innovation, all the testing, all the pilots into commercial solutions. So I think there is still we still a bit behind on that. In fact, we do see that some countries, they have sandboxes where the innovation is allowed to be tested in the real world, and some other countries they don't have. And we do see that this is also an ask for regulators, that sandboxes should be somehow allowed and promoted in all the member states, together with some economic incentive for innovation tools to put these solutions out there. So when we are talking about, so I was asked to speak about directive, innovation and industry. So in terms of industry, I think the European industry is behind when we are looking at energy transition. But at the same time, the European Union is taking the leadership on not allowing that energy transition take place in Europe without our industry. And this, for instance, the European Battery Alliance is an example. We do see that the European Union has realized that transport and electricity in the future, they're going to need batteries. And how are we going to go ahead with our batteries that are not manufactured and assembled in Europe? So the European Union decided to go for an initiative, which I applaud and I think is good, which is to enable the European industry to deliver the solutions we need for the energy transition. And then together with the questions that I was asked, that was directive, innovation, and industry, I would like to add that it's down to citizens and cities. So we do see that there are countries where the citizens can be proactive and they can sell the flexibility into the markets, but there are other countries where they are not. So I think we have to promote harmonization of having more proactive, more active consumers in all the European countries. And as well, I think when we are looking about governance, we don't know exactly, and we don't know on the clean energy package yet, how the cities are going to provide value to the citizens. But we do see that cities today in Europe, they are taking the leadership into banning CO2, into banning diesel cars to be driven in the cities. So I do see that there is a need of governance regulations to take into account that cities have a role to play. They are already playing this role. So at least to leave them with the freedom to keep providing this role, or to somehow provide some governance rulings that promote the cities go a bit more far into promoting a solution for climate change. That was my part. Thank you.
Many thanks, Alicia, for this interesting presentation, very much emphasizing, of course, innovation, Horizon Europe, need for technology leadership like the Battery Alliance, but also, in the end, I would say the cities and citizens, and that's interesting to see as well. For example, the Covenant of Mayors, we see such initiatives that are truly European and that emphasize the points you have made. Yeah. So, is there any questions to Alicia now on her contribution? Any comments? Please. The first question, it took 2 hours to warm up the panel, but sometimes climate change helps, yeah? So we need to throw it to you, please. Please introduce yourself and ask your question.
Okay, can you hear me? I'm Jean-Pierre.
You can speak into that thing.
Into that thing, okay.
That is very important, yeah? You speak into the box, that's a microphone.
Okay. So, I'm Jean-Pierre, I'm a student in France. I actually have a question for the panel. And you have spoken about prosumers and recent developments in the international markets, especially with the trade war that's going on between the US and China, do not have a necessarily good impact on the prices of PV panels. and you revolve around a lot about the subject of the prosumer, who is not always who cannot always invest in PV panels, and who might find in the future that these panels are not very he cannot rentabilize them or make economic sense for the prosumer. How do you think this will affect the lead of Europe in the energy transition, and how do you think it will affect the integration of renewables for the future?
Would like to answer you, Bill?
Well, I think it depends a little bit. What is the benchmark to a PV panel as an end customer on your roof? I know the prices in Denmark and Germany, you pay 30 cents per kilowatt hour, and I think you can have a PV panel on your roof for 19 cents per kilowatt hour if you take an LCOE, a regular, an average. So basically, you are in the money if you are disconnecting yourself from the grid. Why is that? Because the end customer price contains so many charges and levies. Now, if you put it into a sort of totally non-charges, you exclude all these things. I do think, and you compare it, for example, to gas. A gas power station is roughly, the money with 55 euros per megawatt hour. If you take solar plus storage, you should be roughly there as well. I think they are slowly beating the same price range. So I don't think that the tariffs imposed by the Americans on China have a direct effect on a negative impact on European customers.
Okay, thank you.
I don't want to speak as a regulator now, but as a consumer or prosumer who couldn't become a prosumer. There was in this building here a big fair for renewable power and PV panels, and a lot of offers you can get, but not what you need if you're a consumer. You get for big installation, or you have a big roof or a field, then you can get these PV installations, but not as a consumer with a normal roof. And 100% renewables in electricity in Austria and in the rest of the countries of Europe and the world means that on every single roof, on every single house, there is a PV panel installed. Yeah, and here the market is has not delivered yet for being so flexible to put these installations on every roof, with the ambition that it's economically feasible. Yeah, you can integrate it into your system. Yeah, you have maybe the same rate of return than a normal investor, and it looks nice. Yeah, so there's still a lot to do. Maybe if one of the strengths of Europe is integration, I think they can come over these problems and adjust it, all the PV installation, make possible that on every single household, maybe even on church and things like that. At the end of the day, needs to be a PV installation. Yeah, and currently you can only buy panels with 60 cells or 48. That's all. Yeah, and either this size or a little bit slower. And if you don't have the fitting roof, you don't get it. You cannot make it. Yeah, and therefore we need to do more. This was my reaction as a consumer. Maybe this was helpful.
Actually, the gist of my question was the effect on the American spat with the Chinese on the European market concerning the installation of PV panels. But I think this mostly
there still needs to be a lot to be done. And if one of this Europe is the strength to integrate these concepts, yeah, where you need much more flexibility than 48 or 60 cell PV panels, maybe there's a chance in Europe to deliver the products that are really needed at the end. So therefore I see the chances for Europe.
Okay, so first of all, thanks for your question. Yeah, and now I'm happy to invite our last panelist to address you. And this is Marion Labattu. Marion is the policy boss of Euroelectric. Euroelectric being the power sector association in Europe, and the members there are the association on national level.
Yes. Good afternoon. I'm delighted to be here with you. And indeed, as Suzanne said, okay, fine. Is this better? Yeah, more or less. So as Suzanne said, Eurelectric is the trade association which represents utilities across Europe through national association. So we represent generators, suppliers, but also the distribution system operators. So altogether, we represent around 3,500 companies across Europe, a big majority being distribution system operators. Is Europe in the lead? That was the question for this session. And I would like to reflect a little bit on decarbonization and where we want to go. As you know, the European Commission is currently developing its 2050 scenarios to see how Europe could contribute to achieving the Paris Agreement in an ambitious way. And they will come out at the end of the month with scenarios on how to decarbonize the European economy at different levels. So as Eurelectric, we have developed our own study where we have been looking at different pathways to decarbonize the EU economy, focusing on energy-related emissions. So energy-related emissions means CO2 emissions which come from the consumption of energy, and this amounts for a total of 70 to 75% of the total emissions in the EU. So we've looked at 3 EU deep decarbonization scenarios, 80%, 90% and 95% scenario. When you reach 95% scenario, you're very close to a full EU decarbonization. And as part of these scenarios, we try to look at what role electricity could play. We have a product which is already, on average, in Europe, fairly clean in terms of CO2 emissions. The average kilowatt hour in Europe is 60% carbon neutral. So obviously you have very different starting points. You have Norway on the one hand, which is almost fully decarbonized. You have Poland on the other hand, which is still producing electricity with 80% of coal. But on average, 60% of the electricity in Europe is carbon neutral. And this is mostly about renewables, hydro and nuclear as well, which still contributes for 25-27% of the total electricity consumption. And as a power sector at EU level, we have a vision and we have a pledge that our sector, our electricity production will be fully carbon neutral by 2045, or well before 2050, as we said. And all the associations and all the big utilities in Europe have signed up to this vision in order to make all possible efforts to reach this carbon neutrality. So imagine that around mid-century, or well before mid-century, we will have electricity which will be completely clean. And in this context, we believe that electricity can play a key role to achieving this decarbonization of the EU economy. So obviously, our scenarios are driven by different aspects. Ambition. And ambition is EU ambition, but also global ambition. Because when you look at a 95% decarbonization scenario, you need to think about competitiveness of the industry, for example. Will our paper industry, our cement industry, our steel industry engage in decarbonization if we are all alone in Europe? Of course, we have to be in the lead, but we believe that some sort of global coordination will allow us to go even further. Technological developments will be key, and the costs of the technology. We have seen massive cost reductions in renewables in the last years, and this is continuing. We see a lot of potential, for example, for reduction of costs on offshore, a little bit less on onshore and PV, because they have gone already a long way. And a technological potential as well in other sectors. We see massive progress in transport sector on batteries. We see massive progress as well in terms of hydrogen, in decarbonization of industrial processes. Consumer engagement. Will consumers engage and invest in PV panels, invest in storage? Will they, when they have to make the choice to replace their heating system, will they go for an efficient heat pump, or will they go for another solution, which is less efficient maybe? And of course, regulation. Regulatory frameworks will be key in this transition. We are currently working on the transport package at EU level. How fast will this decarbonization happen? In the power sector, yes, of course, but we are already doing a lot, and we've been achieving a higher pace of decarbonization than any other sector in Europe. How will this happen in other sectors? Just to remind you a little bit the scale of this change. If you look at the slides, between 1990 and just below the head of Alicia and 2015, the CO2 reductions was on average 1% per year. if we want to achieve only the 80% CO2 reduction scenario by 2050, we need to move that and scale this up to minus 4% per year of CO2 emission reductions. When we're discussing, everybody now is discussing the net zero emission by 2050. We all expect the Commission to come with at least one scenario which will be completely carbon neutral by 2050. Well, this means around minus 8% of CO2 emissions per year. So just to say that, yes, we are in the lead, we are on track to achieving very high levels of decarbonization, but we have a lot to achieve altogether across sectors, not only the electricity sector, but really through also transport, heating, cooling, buildings, and industrial sectors. One key driver there, and I believe that Europe is quite in the lead in that field, is energy efficiency. Obviously, when you look at achieving very deep decarbonization, this cannot be done on the current trends. And we're looking at between minus 0.6 and minus 1.3% of energy consumption reduction between now and 2050, which means that the total EU final energy consumption should be decreasing quite significantly if we want to be on track to achieve full decarbonization of the EU economy. Being the association of utilities and the electricity companies in Europe, obviously our main focus was the role of electricity in this transition. And we believe and we see also through all the stakeholder engagement that we've done and the modeling that we have been doing with McKinsey for several months, that electricity can play a key role. So today, if you look on the right-hand side, the total electricity consumption in Europe is around 3,000 terawatt hours. We're looking at increasing that probably around 4,500 to 6,000 terawatt hours over the period to 2050. If you look at the yearly growth, year-on-year growth, this means between 1 and 1.5%, which is not as such huge. But obviously this is in the context of a lot of energy efficiency as well, because we're not looking at multiplying by 10 the electricity consumption, which will be quite difficult. What I want to flag here as well is that there will be direct electrification, which is, okay, I plug my car and I consume electricity. But when we look at the decarbonization of other sectors, indirect electrification will also play a key role. So you're going to tell me, okay, what is indirect electrification? So that's hydrogen, that's power to X, power to liquids, which will be clean fuels if they are produced in a clean way, which will be needed to further decarbonize industrial sectors, for instance, or segments of transport which cannot very easily be decarbonized with clean electricity. And this indirect electrification will induce a higher electricity demand for the power sector as well. If we look at our highest scenario, we're talking about 1,200 terawatt hours of demand in 2050, of electricity demand, which comes only from these power to gas, H2, etc. Which means that there is a very strong dialogue to be had between the power sector and the other sectors as well, including the gas sector, including the industrial sectors. I'm going to jump immediately to the results, and you can find all the details on our website. Today, electrification is around 22% on average in Europe. We have decarbonized 22% since 1990, and we have 22% of the final energy consumption is electricity today in Europe. When we look at our scenarios in 2050, so in 2050 we are in a decarbonized Europe, we're looking at between 38% and 60% of electricity as a share of the total final energy consumption. Of course, this happens in very different ways across sectors. If I look at transport, our most ambitious scenarios see almost full electrification of road transport. This means cars, because we see that an electric car is much more efficient today than a fuel cells car or than a gas car. Obviously, when you move to other segments, such as long-distance trucks or maritime or aviation, we see the role of other clean fuels playing a much more important role, such as biofuels or power-to-gas solutions, which will need to be further investigated. If I move very quickly to the buildings, we see a key role for heat pumps, obviously, in the heating sector, in residential, but also in commercial buildings. So the scenarios are looking at different also policy and regulatory frameworks to make sure that there is a fair competition between different energy carriers, to make sure that when consumers are faced with a choice, they make the right choice. And we believe that today, the fact that electricity is carrying a lot of taxes and levies is not necessarily providing the right signals for consumers to invest in the most efficient and clean solutions. Moving to industry, there is a lot of potential in the paper industry, in the steel industry, in the cement industry to some extent, to electrify the heating. The high heat temperature, but also the medium heat temperature and the low heat temperatures for industrial processes. And of course, the indirect electrification will play a key role, because when we look at decarbonization of industrial processes, for example, hydrogen will play a key role. And this hydrogen, if it's clean, needs to be produced with clean electricity through electrolyzers. As part of this study, we've spent quite some time tracking the innovation in the electrification field. Of course, a lot is happening, for example, in China, where they are the world leaders on electric buses, and when they make a decision that next year they have 3,000 electric buses running in the city, and we are a little bit slower in Europe. Nevertheless, I believe that some initiatives and some innovations are showing that Europe could be in the lead, and we have all interest to remain in the lead and to invest in pilot projects and to try and make these technologies and to bring them to the market, because that's our chance actually to then sell them externally at a global level. So a few examples. The first one is the hybrid project, which is fossil-free still. So it's only at a pilot stage, but it's really a combination and a partnership of a utility, so an electricity producer and supplier, working together with a big steel plant and trying to produce clean steel through hydrogen. I'm not going to go in very details, but you can go on their website. It's quite interesting, and this opens new doors to decarbonization of the industry through indirect electrification. You're going to tell me, forget about it. Aviation will never happen. We will never be able to decarbonize aviation. I will not tell you that I have the solution for long-distance flights, but nevertheless, if you look at Avinor in Norway, they are planning to have first commercial electric flights around 2030 for small planes, okay, and short distance, 1 hour and a half, 2 hours. But in our most ambitious scenarios, we assume, together with a number of stakeholders that we have contacted and discussed with, that short distance flights could well be electrified by 2050. And that's an innovation space which opens new ways for business models and for electricity to decarbonize difficult segments. I will not repeat what Alicia said, but I believe that industrial leadership is being shown by Europe. Of course, in the field of batteries, other continents have gone quite far, but we're trying to catch up and to bring together all industrial players to play the key role and maybe invent the next generation of batteries which will enable further electrification. In terms of what is needed, and this is something we are now investigating with the second part of our study on what is needed in the power sector to reach this full decarbonization and to provide all this electricity, I believe that investment signals are not completely solved. We have the clean energy package, which will ensure probably non-retroactivity, more visibility for investors in renewables with national plans, with the governance regulation. Nevertheless, we see that investors are in need of some certainty and longer-term price signals, especially in a world with very high shares of renewables, where the price signals are going to be very, very volatile, and there is a question mark on whether the current market design will make it happen for the power sector. This is also very important for consumers. As I said, what are the investment signals for consumers to go into the electric appliances and the clean solutions? And we need to solve this problem of taxes and levies, which makes electricity less competitive against other fuels. Investment signals as well for the grids, because the grids will need to support this decarbonization and this electrification, which will be increasingly decentralized. Their business models is not anymore about putting more cables on the ground. It will be this, but it will also be about harnessing the local flexibility and making sure that they can work through demand response aggregation and through market players which will provide this flexibility to the distribution system operators, but also to the transmission system operators. And I will conclude that the electricity sector has come a long way. We are on track, and we will be publishing at the end of the month our scenarios to show how we are going to be decarbonized well before 2050. Now, other sectors need also to show a lot of leadership. The latest statistics show an increase in emissions in the transport sector. We need to tackle this problem in a very serious way, and we call for very ambitious targets and quotas when it comes, for example, to transport sector and the current transport package, which will be discussed in trialogues again next week. So I will conclude on that. I believe that Europe is in the lead on many aspects, but a lot needs to be done also on other sectors and on the investment framework, which will enable the power sector to bring decarbonization to other sectors. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Marion, for this very interesting and complementary conclusion. And I would start with two questions. First of all, unfortunately, Philippe Vier is not anymore. I don't see him anyhow. I think he had to leave at 4, but he was saying that we are failing on the energy efficiency target. Marion, you've been saying that Europe is leading on energy efficiency. How can I understand?
I think that we have come a long way in terms of energy efficiency in buildings, for example, but also in different sectors. And I think that we can even go further on energy efficiency if we go along this road of electrification. Why? Because you have the direct energy efficiency, which is about changing your windows in your building, for example. But it's also about the basic energy efficiency of how much energy you use for a specific process. If I look at an electric car, it's 3 to 4 times more energy efficient than an internal combustion engine car. Why? Because you put electricity in the car and you get that in terms of automotive power, which is not the case with a combustion car, where you're going to lose half of the efficiency of your fuel in the process of moving the car.
Good generation in a bad way, yeah?
As well, but it's also the case for a heat pump. A heat pump is much more efficient than a gas boiler, for example, or than a fuel cell boiler. So I think that by going this way of more electrification, we can be also in the lead in terms of energy efficiency.
Many thanks for this answer, and I think you also showed this decoupling of GDP growth and, of course, energy consumption, yeah? So now we have seen all the very interesting presentations, and we have a little bit of time left. We need to conclude at 4:15, yeah? So I would like to invite you to ask some questions, but again, I will abuse of my role and ask the first question, yeah? Batteries and technology have been mentioned by several of you. And after this experience that is seen as a Waterloo for European energy policy of subsidies for especially renewables, yeah, what is your take? Should we do something similar on batteries? Should we really make this happen? The Battery Alliance, should we support massively storage and batteries, or would the market deliver? I would like to have the views of all of you. How do we get this on the ground? Yeah?
To say this is definitely a combination of the market, but also get the good regulation and supporting research and innovation. I think it's shortly to say that Europe has definitely the ambition to be leading on this. It's very ambitious on the target, but it's very essential also to go and benchmark, looking on other areas in the world, US, States, California, and so on. What are they doing on markets? Looking at South Korea and Japan, what are they doing on fuel cells and hydrogen? So really looking out and do the benchmark. Are we on track on this? And then a short comment also. We talk about digitalization and energy integration. That's just to say we need muscles and brains. We need the digitalization to control all this. But definitely also need the muscles to integrate the physical capacity that the brain should control, actually. So that's the short comments.
I rather take this one. I think there are 3 aspects for the battery development in scale up in Europe. First of all, it's not the utility industry that will drive that, or the energy industry. This will be clearly an automobile lead, and we're seeing the first plants being built. BMW has teamed up with Chinese. Other automobile industries are teaming up, are building up their own factories, and I think that will be actually the big dynamics where the battery industry is going to pick up or not. The second aspect is circular economy. I think right now it is a little bit what we also have with PV solar panels. To what extent can we reuse that material? And I think the third aspect, which is a very important aspect, because this is geopolitically, strategically most important aspect, it is about the rare earths and rare resources. And I do think we as Europeans will have to develop new technologies, and I understand that we are already trying new technologies without cobalt, but with mangan, which I don't know how you call that in English. But that is not a rare earth and not a rare resource. So I think we should definitely not fall from one dependence to the next dependence and not make ourselves dependent on, few African and few Chinese resources. These are the three things that are relevant more than the subsidy issue, because e-mobility is coming.
Subsidies. Big question mark. Batteries is one form to store electricity. The same is pumped hydro storage. This is also, you can store electricity there, and also electrolyzers, to make hydrogen from electricity. So there are different options. So maybe, and this has to be developed, why to support a certain technology. That's why I would put a big question mark on the issue giving subsidies to batteries usage. Maybe when you're for research and technology, yes, but for the other thing, not. And then there's a regulatory question. Is storage an issue of the market? Yeah, has to be provided by the market, or is it an issue in the regulated environment? So we basically currently we have both, because gas storage is a regulated issue, and electricity pumped hydropower stations is competitive issue. So there's not a model in Europe how to treat storage in the overall system. So different approaches in electricity and in natural gas. And one of the questions will be how to treat electrolyzers in the system or batteries. This is a political regulatory debate in Europe that will take place when the next commission comes, I guess.
Well, first of all, I think the electricity system will need many different types of storage and many different types of flexibility on an hourly basis, on a daily basis, on a monthly basis, and most difficult on a seasonal basis when you have a lot of renewables in one season and you need to transfer it to another period of the year. So I think that most of it will come from market signals and the right regulatory frameworks. We need to make sure that storage and batteries can compete with other sources of flexibility. Right now we have a lot of flexibility in the system from thermal assets and traditional assets and from hydro. But when we evolve and look at scenarios with much more renewables, you start to see a business case for these batteries at different time frames. So I think it's really about making sure that they can sell in all these markets, the day ahead, the intraday, the balancing, the ancillary services, and the network codes are working on this. We need to make sure that they don't have to pay network tariffs or network charges when they charge and then discharge, and because then it makes the business case very, very, very difficult. And also to make sure that they can benefit from the right price signals to secure the investments and maybe longer-term price signals or their participation in capacity markets could be a good way for them to be invested by market players.
For me, I think the technology should be down to the market to decide which technology should be the best. But if we're going to have batteries and we don't manufacture batteries in Europe and it's threatening the manufacture of cars in Europe and also our capacity to provide ourselves the products that we need, I think it's good that the European Union put money on this. So that's my personal opinion.
It was very interesting to get your views on the storage question, which is, of course, one of the big things these days when you look at the perception of technology. Storage is on top of the top. And was right that Mario mentioned already how do you define storage, yeah? And we could even say cooling towers is storage, power to gas is storage, etc. Yeah? So that's already a challenge. And very interesting dimensions have been mentioned by all of you. It's the automotive sector that's going to roll it out. We could say Tesla is an evidence already, yeah, in some senses, but it's also a circular economy. It is a regulatory regime that is crucial, participation in different markets, and that we have both today. We have a regulated and a marketing, so there's a, in a way, immature discussion on that storage dimension. Yeah? But now to take it back to our topic, is Europe in the lead on the energy transition? And you have seen very interesting and diverse contributions from Alicia, from Marion, from Dietmar, from Vera, from Philippe, and from Anders. Yeah? I would like you to vote again. Do you believe, after having listened to all our panelists, that Europe is in the lead? Is Europe in the lead after all you have heard? And of course, my introductory statement was including 4 elements, and we have seen it's much more than that. That makes it lead, yeah? So what do you say? It's leading, so please raise your hand, yeah? Is Europe in the lead? Oh my God, yeah. So now we, in fact, we have decreased, yeah? So you have contributed to depressing the positive approach, but it might be also some change in the participants, yeah? So who's saying it's not in the lead, yeah? Who says Europe is not in the lead on the energy revolution, yeah? Okay, so it's more or less the same, and no one of the panelists, that gives me hope, yeah, is saying that. I think it was very clear in your contribution that this is a lot of ambition and a lot of action that yet have to happen, yeah? And to recall again the dimensions that you all have provided, yeah? Climate, it's innovation, it's competitiveness, so it's good governance, regulatory framework, yeah, dynamic regulation, yeah, it's renewables, of course. Then we have the fantastic triangle, yeah. It's the energy efficiency, it's system solutions, it's digitalization, it's network, it's security of supply, and that's about the 10 dimensions that we have identified as being decisive for Europe being in the lead. So I give you the opportunity, don't miss out on it, to ask a question to our fantastic panelists. So who would like to conclude on your side? Any statement? No? So then I give the opportunity to all our panelists, those who are still here, yeah, to have a last word. Yeah? And could you just pick kind of a statement? What is the most important, according to you, for really ensuring that Europe is in the lead? Yeah? What is it that you give to the next Parliament and Commission that you say, hey, that is really needed in order to make sure Europe is really in the lead? Yeah?
If I should pick one, I definitely say that Europe could be good at this system sector coupling issue. I went to a conference in US, and this is not really in the topic there. We are ahead in this area. We have the possibilities to lead on this, and it's very essential. So the Parliament should go for this, and that's also to give the market pull for the production of electro biofuels, just so you get the investment and the knowledge and then research and innovation.
Well, I think we have the 3 prerequisites to be very successful in Europe. First of all, we're very versatile. We're very different, but still we are united in one big economic zone. and we can see it with Brexit now, what's coming up if you're not part of it. Second of all, I think energy transition is a very complex, I think, a process that includes everyone. It embraces the central aspects, the decentralized aspects, different technologies, different sectors, different solutions, different players. And I think this is where Europe has this colorful, support. And third of all, we're familiarized. Climate policy is 25 years old, and I think Europe was very much in the lead, triggering it off. And I think it is, if you listen to your children today, I mean, they are very climate concerned, very climate conscious. So I do think we have the right mindset here.
Will be very short. So with united forces, viribus unitis, Europe can tackle that problems and can make out the best of it.
I think that we can show leadership on the just energy transition. We are not leaving anyone behind, and I think that's our strength. You see that some countries will need more efforts. Coal regions, for example, and we have the ability to show leadership in working with the coal regions, trying to retrain workers, retrain people, and make sure that they can shift to another type of energy system. And I think this is a leadership we can show to the world, because when you look at the blocking and the big blocking elements and big barriers to the energy transition in many occasions is existing industries, regions that are stuck on one specific type of industrial activity, people that cannot be retrained, etc. So I think if we move forward in the just energy transition, we will show leadership and we will advance decarbonization at global level.
For me, I think Europe have the opportunity to push for market-driven, and allow consumers to bring the resources to the market.
Many thanks to all of you. Many thanks to the panelists for this very interesting discussion. And I think we should hope that the Katowice and the next year COP25 are going successful. Many thanks, and let's give a hand to our very good panelists.
Bon, thank you. Thank you. Voilà. Voilà. Oui.